Democrats and Republican lawmakers, meanwhile, are demanding answers. They're following, of course, that Christmas Day bombing attempt. But some counterterrorism experts say that the botched plot reveals systemic weaknesses in America's national security, gaps that were never fixed after 9/11. Here with us now, Eleanor Hill, the former staff director for the Joint Congressional Inquiry into the attacks of 9/11. Thank you so much for joining us. There are a number of key recommendations from your investigation. It was a joint House-Senate investigation, and this was the document, 900 pages of recommendations. And among them was the recommendation which led to the creation of the Counterterrorism Center.
That's correct.
But as you pointed out in your summary, there has to be human analysis. We were talking about this a few minutes ago.
Right.
Where do you see the key gaps from what we know so far?
Well, again, everything I say is based on what I've seen in the press. I'm not in government now, so I don't have, inside information.
But there's some real parallels, at least from the superficial information.
There certainly are. I mean, based on what I've seen reported, what we found in the 9/11 inquiry was a failure to appreciate the collective significance of information, to identify and focus on what was really significant intelligence, put it all together, and then disseminate it to the people who need it in time for them to take action on it. From everything I can see and what's being reported, we have the same sort of thing happening here. There was information in the system. People, for whatever reason, did not consider it significant enough to pass it on to the right people who could have put it together, analyzed it, and hopefully gotten some idea of what the big picture is. So it is eerily similar to what we saw in 9/11, almost very eerie, because it's very, very similar. And, our report came out publicly in July of 2003. We're 6.5 years later, and we're still seeing the same thing. So
you have here a situation where just today the Secretary of State mentioned that the State Department did everything it was supposed to do. It isn't tasked with revoking visas, but it did have the information from the father who came into the embassy. Presumably the station chief would share that with others in the embassy. And that cable did go to the State Department. It did go in Washington. It went to the Counterterrorism Center.
Right.
But nobody ever checked to see that he already had a multiple entry visa.
Well, and one of the things in the 9/11 scenario was that Khalid al-Midhar, who was eventually one of the hijackers, had a multiple entry visa to the United States, and the CIA in that case knew about that in 2000, early 2000, and didn't even put him on a watch list at the State Department until the end of August 2001. So it's the same sort of thing all over again. The fact that what I'm hearing from the press is not only was the information about the visa out there, I'm also hearing there were bits and pieces of the name al-Farouk and the Nigerian connection. So it seems very much like we saw in 9/11. There were different pieces of the puzzle out there, and the challenge for the agencies in the intelligence community was to recognize it was significant and bring it all together and understand what it meant, and that didn't happen.
Are we expecting too much when the National Security Agency picks up a fact, an intercept back in August about the Yemenis training a Nigerian? Are we expecting too much for them to put that together with the subsequent report in November that came from the father? With all of these data coming in, how does that technically get combined?
Yeah, it may not be that the National Security Agency puts it together. Their job is to get it to the folks who are supposed to put it together.
No, I mean at the Counterterrorism Center.
Right. And the Counterterrorism Center, which we recommended, the Commission recommended, is supposed to be an all-source fusion center. It's supposed to collect everything, bring it together, and have really good analysts. And you mentioned analysts at the beginning. That is absolutely crucial. It's not just about information sharing. It's about the ability to do creative, aggressive analysis of this information. That didn't exist before 9/11. We were very critical of it in our report. We recommended all sorts of improvements. If you listen to the agencies over the last 6 years, they claim they have made those improvements. This is a test, and from what I'm reading, it doesn't seem like we did very well,
Very briefly, maybe not in this case, but just in general, we hear about a lot of rivalries between the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA, between Dennis Blair and Leon Panetta,
right.
Whether it's institutional or personal.
Right.
Is that inevitable, and is that something that was created post 9/11 Commission, which perhaps was not an improvement?
Well, you know, this goes back to the government, the age-old problem in government of turf battles, whether it's in law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies,
FBI,
whatever.
CIA,
this has gone on for years and years and years. We saw it in 9/11. I assume it's going on today. I'm not in government. I have heard, unfortunately, since this incident happened, reports of people in government claiming there are still turf battles going on, and there are still agency jealousies and credit wars and this sort of things going on. That doesn't help the big picture. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate that when they put those feelings aside and those turf wars aside is usually in the wake of a huge disaster, as we had on 9/11. That's the best time when the agencies try to rise to the occasion and put away the jealousies. Unfortunately, you can't just do that when a disaster happens. You have to be doing that all along the road, because we are facing a threat, and the threat has not gone away, and they have to, you know, learn to get over that and move on.
Eleanor Hill, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.